It literally had been a week since I moved out of my parents' house, and I was just getting used to my own independence for the first time ever. Bills, doing your own shopping, when you end up living alone for the first time. There was no more hand holding. It was all exciting and worrying to me. However, these nights was when I began feeling as though I wasn't alone. I can't explain it, but it all started with just this feeling I had in my gut that something in the corner of my bedroom was just standing there and staring at me every single night. It was just nerve wracking and so uncomfortable. I decided to instead begin to sleep on my sofa. I lived on my sofa for a few months and I began telling the family my experiences. They blew me down, telling me, "You're just scaring yourself. It's your first time living alone and your mind is playing tricks on you." I understand their point. However, a few days later after that, it got even worse. I began experiencing it again, only this time opposite the sofa I was sleeping on. Like it had followed me. This time again in the corner of my room, and it felt much stronger this time. It happened more than once, and at times I noticed and felt it. I would stare back for minutes on end to see if I could see anything. I may have been tired, but I do remember seeing a black mass or shape in the dark corner on the odd occasion, but nothing else happened. A few weeks later, the family still made fun out of my experiences and didn't believe me. So I took it into my hands and decided to finally give sleeping in the bedroom another go. That night I will never forget. I just finished gaming and decided to head to bed around 2 a.m. As I finally got into bed, I laid there facing up. I suddenly felt terrified. Like the kind of scared you get and end up petrified, not knowing what to do? I honestly felt like this entity was just there next to me, just standing there over the side of my bed, staring at me as I tried to sleep. It took a few minutes, which felt like forever, but I finally rushed out of bed for the light switch, got my duvet and pillows for another night on my sofa. I told myself I'm not going to sleep in there anymore after that. However, this entity didn't stop there. It got more active. It seemed now that whenever I went to the living room, bathroom, or kitchen at night, it was as if it had now started to follow me further, and I could just feel it. Like right behind me, following every step I made, and that's not an exaggeration at all. Honestly, how it felt, and still feels on occasions. There were even times when I opened my living room door to the hallway, which connects every room in the house, and always at the end of that hallway by that bedroom door, I felt it staring back at me, watching. This is where it gets weird. I've mentioned now hundreds of times these feelings towards it, and how it escalated. It got so strong to the point I could just sense it, and I guessed at the time by instinct it being a female spirit. I'm no psychic or medium, it was all just a mental guess. I called my mum, and after a lengthy conversation, she summed it up to maybe someone passing away in these old flats, to which I agreed. As this town and flats date almost as far, I'm aware, back about 100 years, it was just nice to finally have someone who was listening and trying to give me some understanding to it all. After about a year of dealing with this, I decided to try something I've never tried before. Attempt to catch an EVP. With how frequent I sensed this entity, I figured it would be in my best interest to at least try this little experiment. Unfortunately, being such an amateur in the field, I did this through a bunch of free apps, so I highly doubt their authenticity. Although there was one session that I cannot explain. It literally took me up to about a month of thinking and courage to build up, to finally see it through. It was about 1 a.m. I lit a white candle, placed it on a tray in the bedroom, and set a device to blare white noise all in the dark. I was at that point too scared to be in the room in case things kicked off, especially as I was alone, so I shut the door on my way out and entered the living room down the hallway. I remember putting my TV on mute and making sure every light was off, and I purposefully left the living room door open so I could listen down the hallway to the static white noise being emitted from the bedroom. A few minutes passed, and I could hear it. The sounds of females whispering from the hallway. I couldn't believe it. I was amazed and also kind of scared. I couldn't make out the whispering, but I know I heard it. The whispering went on for about 10 minutes. That was before I hit the lights and pulled the plug on the whole thing. Have others had any experiences? Yes. My younger brother stayed one night with his girlfriend and witnessed an iron fall off a board on its own. They haven't said much about the incident other than they believe now. My mum and her other half came round to sort of investigate. Strangely, their phone batteries both immediately died after reaching the corner of the bedroom. This was witnessed by all of us. My sister, who's a skeptic, stayed the weekend. She said she had very weird dreams, and one day when she was there alone, she decided to try asking questions through a recorder, trying to capture an EVP, and she did. The EVP came through as, "Can you see me?" which frightened and shocked her. She sent it to all her friends, which I know surprised even them. Unfortunately, I never got a copy of it, but it was enough to convince her and them. After all this, finally the family believed me about what I was dealing with. Other odd happenings. I've never had anything menacing, although there were a few odd things that just tend to happen. I've heard knocks on my front room door. This is very, very rare, and it does scare me when it does happen, as I'm the only one in the flat. I once told myself to open the storage cupboard door to see if I would see anything one day, and when I did, I could have sworn I saw a large black mass move. I immediately shut the door and said out loud, "I shouldn't have done that." This is a comedy to keep myself calm. Very recently, I was woken scared to death as I tried sleeping in the bedroom again. However, at 3 a.m., I was woken by a large bang on the wall above my head where I slept. It definitely wasn't the neighbour next to me, as that wall is linked to my storage cupboard. It scared the hell out of me as it was so loud. I opened the door the next day and nothing had fallen into it at all, and nothing could have made it sound the way it did. And the sound certainly came from there. Another recent weird event when I was running a hot shower. It was steaming for a solid 5 minutes before I tried adjusting the faucets to the right temperature. With a small bathroom, all the mirrors were steamed up, and the bathroom temperature was hot apart from one spot, which was really cold. I placed my hand and arm in the spot and got goosebumps, but everywhere else was warm from the shower. It was kind of new and exciting, especially as the cold spot just went after I noticed it. The apparition. Yep, it did happen, and once only in these 5 years. I just got home from my late shift at work around 11 p.m. And I just want to explain that as you open the front door, you enter straight into the hallway, and on the left, there's the front room, in-front kitchen, so on. As I opened the door, I turned to my left to hit the light switch. But before I did, I saw her. It was literally for 10 seconds. She was in my front room staring at me. Long black hair, female, about 5'5", young, lifeless looking, standing almost in front of me. I literally jumped out of my skin. I instantly shut the door to shield myself from her. I told myself I was done. I'm not staying the night. After a minute, I rushed the door open and hit the light, gathered a few things, and stayed around my friend's house. So for context, my mom had a friend with severe mental health issues. She was in and out of psych wards, on a ton of medication, and quite frankly, life gave her a really bad hand to deal with. She was on 24/7 oxygen due to cancer, and really just had a lot of issues in her life. My mom befriended her at a really dark time in her life. She didn't have much, so my mom and I helped out with food and money and whatever we really could. I wasn't necessarily close to the lady, but here's what happened. About 2 weeks ago, she got into a fight with her son, causing him to attempt suicide. She was drunk at the time and had to call the police to take him to the hospital. They left her behind when they took him, and as soon as he was gone, she overdosed on sleeping tablets and insulin, and allegedly also drank bleach. Cut forward about 4 days, her son wakes up and hears from family friends that his mom committed suicide. He doesn't have anyone except us. The police refused to give him the keys to their house until he went to identify his mother's body at the morgue. He asked me and my husband to go with him, and here's where it all started pretty much. We went with him to the morgue, dealt with paperwork and all their issues, and eventually they let us go to the back to see her. On a side note, this was my first ever time inside a morgue, and let me just tell you, that smell is horrible. I never expected it to be that bad. Anyways, they wheeled her out and we saw her, and I felt this extremely heavy weight on my chest. I've always had a gift for seeing and communicating with the other side, and this was exactly that feeling. An overwhelming pressure that almost feels like it drains you when it's there. Almost like every single person laying there wanted me to hear them. This stopped as soon as we got in the car again. Now, this week I've struggled staying asleep. I keep having bad dreams and feeling something watching me. Our house is haunted, no doubt, but it feels like there's a new entity. My husband woke up one night to go pee and woke me up when he got up as well. He was really quiet and eventually told me he saw what he thought was a spirit standing in front of one of the cupboards in the kitchen. He told me initially he thought it was a person who broke in, but when he took a second look, they were gone. He also noted that he wasn't scared, but just startled. About 2 days after that, I woke up to use the bathroom as well, and I saw the same exact figure, but in our room, and it was hunched over behind a chair. I also didn't feel scared or anything, and sort of just let it be. I did feel a bit uneasy when I went back to bed though. But here's the thing. I don't know if it is my mom's friend, because the figure we both saw was entirely black. The only thing they really had in common was being extremely skinny. I haven't tried communicating with the entity. What do you guys think I should do? I tried to end my connection to spirits and all those things, because church told me it was evil, and I'll go to hell and all sorts of religious crap. I've distanced myself from the church and have been trying to get back in touch with these senses of mine, because I know these things are very much real. Yesterday, I was home alone for a while, and I was sort of just meditating by myself and focusing on the definite energy I felt in the room. For context, the house we've been living in for the last 10 years has a lot of activity in it. Shadow people, full apparitions, sounds, the works. I kept telling it can make contact with me and that I'm opening the pathway for it. I shit you not, I heard a definite little kid voice right next to me saying, "Hello?" I was sort of shook. It actually worked and kind of just froze for a second. I've never made direct contact with a spirit before, at least not since I've grown up. I've only ever seen them moving in the corner of my eye, heard disembodied voices talking to each other outside, or just feeling a presence. I did talk to them when I was little though. My mum has told me that I saw things no one else did from a very young age. But obviously I don't remember these happenings, but only know of them through hearsay. My mom told me that I would refuse to sleep in my room at the time in our old house. She told me that I'd always start screaming if they left me alone, even for a minute. I was fine sleeping in any other room of the house, just not that room. Weirdest part is that there was a part of the wall that refused to get painted over. Whenever we would paint it, the reddish oval shape would just bleed through. When I got a bit older, my mum would hear me talking to people who weren't there, and when she would ask me if I had an imaginary friend, I'd get mad because they were real. We had a lot of experiences like these, but I think the first two I can remember, the ones where I'm writing about now. I shared a room with my brother most of my childhood, and I'd never be able to sleep because apparently I felt the need to stay awake and watch him sleep. I would freak out if I thought he wasn't breathing. I have no idea why I did this. I would stay up so late that eventually I'd just pass out. One night, I decided I wasn't going to do that, since I got in trouble if my parents found out, and my dad would beat the shit out of me for it. When I lay down and turned to sleep, I heard our cupboard doors open and shut really loudly a few times, until I stuck my head out from under the covers to see what was going on. Well, there was nothing, except the cupboard doors were wide open, and I noticed my brother wasn't breathing. I freaked the fuck out and ended up screaming so loudly, my parents woke up. Of course, they didn't believe me one bit, but I knew what happened. The second experience was when I was about 8 or 9, I'm not exactly sure. I went to sleep over at my grandma's house, and at around midnight I woke up because I felt something brush over my face. When I sat up in bed, I was face to face with what I can only describe as a ghost. She looked like a normal human, but see-through and almost as if she was glowing. She was wearing a long dress and her hair was tied up in a bun, and she was just staring at me. I wasn't scared at all, but I felt uncomfortable. I woke my grandma up to tell her what I was seeing, but she just told me to ignore it and go to sleep. My grandmother believes in the paranormal as well, and has had a few experiences like I have in her house. When I was 14, 7 years ago, I was having nightmares. I don't remember all of them, but it'd be one that I'd be paralysed in my bed, unable to move or speak. My house was on fire and there was an evil woman coming towards me, and a guy I guess was her sidekick. Every time I had this dream, I woke up right before she got me, because I was clenching my hands so hard they'd bleed every single time. I'd also see stuff or shapes, I guess, in real life. A face, I still can't understand what it was, hovering over me. Also, I could see my neighbour and his damn green lightning. He was zooming in his apartment. My sister didn't believe it until she saw it herself. I don't know what it was, but that guy or spirit was running all over the place, and it was really fast. If you'd blink, you could miss it. Almost seems like it was messing with me. I don't know. That apartment has been empty for years now. Anyway, the nightmare stopped and then I had dreams. First, a bird was staring at me outside my window, a beautiful white bird. Dream after dream, the bird was inside now, but later on the bird disappeared and a man replaced it. He was sitting on my sister's bed, watching me. He never talked, but I knew what he wanted me to do. He was speaking in my head, yet I couldn't hear his voice. He brought me a dog through the window, and I had to keep it a secret. I loved dogs and my family didn't want one, so I think that was his way of getting closer to me. I remember I felt somewhat protected or at peace when I was dreaming of him. He'd want me to hide him. I don't exactly remember all of my dreams with him, but he appeared often. I thought he was my guardian angel, honestly. He'd bring me stuff and he was nice. Once in my dream we were with my whole family outside, and I'd be talking with him, yet my family couldn't see him. He said to not tell them he was there, and I asked why, and he said they wouldn't understand. I think that's the last time I dreamt of him. Anyway, the next dream I had, it was our mom. It was more like a nightmare. Something was hunting us, me and my little sister. I don't have a little sister, I am the little sister. But anyway, it turns out it was our mom. My little sister didn't look related to me at all, and she ended up killing her and sucking her blood out with a machine or something. The mom in my dream didn't look like my in real life mom, but I knew it was her. Yet I started running after my sis killed her, and I found my real mom, and I was yelling for help. Weird marks or scratches somehow started appearing on my arms with a weird looking bee and symbols. I was bleeding. That was the last nightmare I had, and aside from the dreams and nightmares, I'd always hear weird stuff, or feel like someone's watching me. Sometimes the lights would flicker or I'd hear noise in the house, as if someone is in, for example, the kitchen. Sometimes I'd see some figures like someone standing in the corner, but it'd disappear. After that nightmare, my mom put a picture of Saint Mary on the wall in my room and everything stopped. The man that watched me sleep never showed up again, and after a while, I realised he might not have been an angel, because if he was, why would he leave? And why would he hide from my family? The way he tried to come closer to me is weird, giving me something I want, but I have to keep it a secret. Doesn't make sense to me. I know these were dreams, but something is wrong. I think that man is back, or whatever it is. I don't know if it's something evil or not, but I think it's back because I felt something kick me on my back the other night, and I've been hearing stuff again. I was in the shower and I could hear stuff going on outside. Sometimes I can hear it messing with the door, trying to open it, even though it's locked. How can I find out what this thing is and what it wants from me? Or if it's evil? How could I protect myself and my family? In the summer of 2002, my family had booked a holiday in North Wales, in a small seaside town called Morfanefin. I was 7, my brother 5, and my baby sister who was coming up to her first birthday. We were also joined by my baby sister, who was coming up to her first birthday. We were also joined by my grandparents and aunt, Laura. My grandparents had paid for the place that we were staying in and also rented a large people carrier type car so that we could all travel together without having to drive both of the cars from Norfolk to where we lived in South London and then all the way to North Wales. It worked out better that way. And no one wanted to split us kids into 2 cars and face arguments of who wants to ride with Nan and who wants to ride with Grandad. An argument that always broke out between us on other family holidays. When we got to the house that we were staying in, I remember being in awe at the sheer size of the giant white building before us and thinking just how much it could have cost to rent. I asked my nan this exact question and she simply shrugged it off and said it wasn't much. She simply wanted our family to enjoy ourselves without worrying about the cost of it, something that didn't come naturally to a family that was already used to the thin line of poverty. The house itself was a large white building that was split into 2 floors. Large living room and kitchen diners on each floor and about 14 bedrooms in total. I equated the house to be more of a mansion than a house. It was simply that big compared to my 7-year-old self. The house also had a large garden that slopes up the steep hill that my parents considered too dangerous for us to play in, due to the landscaping and jutting rocks. But I do remember pestering my dad throughout our stay to let me go outside by the back patio to see the strange birds that had made a nest in a small passage way by the back door. My nan told me that they were swifts, and I was fascinated by them. I loved birds, and the city only ever had pigeons and house sparrows. They seemed so boring in comparison. And through the swifts, they were exciting to my animal-loving autistic self. The most exciting part of this house was getting to choose a room that I would have all to myself. Back home, we had a small 2-bedroom house, and my siblings and I were crammed into 1 bedroom. Good old council estate living. So I was more than pleased to spend a week in my own bed, in my own room, away from my brother and baby sister. The room I chose was on the ground floor at the end of a corridor, literally the furthest room from the others as I could possibly find, and by sheer luck, I was the only one on that corridor. My parents chose a room a little past that corridor so that they could keep an eye on me and my brother, who also had the same idea to choose a room as far from me as possible. It wasn't long before the sun started to set, and as my parents and grandparents sat in the living room upstairs, chatting away with a glass of wine, I decided to head to bed to relax and let the long car ride wash away in a mountain of pillows and deep sleep. I loved my sleep, and knowing that I would be able to sleep without any disturbances from my siblings felt like a blessing. Little did I know that my dreams of solitary sleep weren't going to last for long. Whilst I slept soundly on the first night and woke up refreshed and ready to explore the nearby beach and travel inland for some sightseeing with my family, the second night was completely different. We got back, had some dinner, enjoyed a bit of TV as my brother and I played on the patio out back. The sun started to go down and my dad called us both inside to start getting ready for bed. Me, still fascinated by the swift nest, looked up at it and pleaded to my dad to let me stay until I saw the parents come back, as I didn't want the eggs to be lonely. They hadn't hatched just yet, So I was confused as to why I hadn't heard the mummy bird on them tonight. My dad just told me that she was sleeping, just as I should be. I admitted defeat and followed him inside and her to go down to room to grab my pajamas and just frozen. The corridor that my room was located down was suddenly so much darker than it was the previous night. Something within me told me not to go down there, that it was dangerous and spooky. I was thoroughly creeped out. I felt the hair on my arms stand up and chills ran down my back. I felt like something was about to jump out of the dark, attack me and devour me in a one. I ran to my parents in the living room and pleaded with them to let me sleep in a different room. I was hysterical and crying, nearly at the point of a meltdown, and just as my dad was about to compromise and let me switch rooms with my brother, my mother stepped in and told me to suck it up, and that because I chose that room, I was stuck with it. Yeah, she wasn't a good mother, and it would be another 15 years before I saw her for who she really is. But that's a whole other story. So I sulked back to my room. I was stuck with it, and there was nothing that I could do other than push past my fears and try and get some sleep. I cried in silence that night, knowing that I was alone, scared, and that my mother didn't care that I was so terrified. Eventually I fell asleep, thinking of the swift nest and the little eggs that were up there, hoping that I would see the babies hatch before our holiday ended. Needless to say, I did not sleep well that night. I tossed and turned, struggling to get comfortable and settle down, knowing that the spooky corridor was just a few feet away, and my mother's words were playing in my mind over and over again. I felt so hopeless, but I couldn't speak up about it with knowing what my emotions would be dismissed, just like they always were. Eventually, I let the fatigue take over and carry me away into a deep slumber. I just let my brain shut off and I drifted to sleep. I wasn't asleep for long, maybe 2 hours before I was woken by a noise that sounded just like a growl right by my ear. My eyes burst open and I was immediately met with two red glowing eyes right in front of my face. Standing in front of the window was a large dog, bigger than I had ever seen, with thick, shaggy black fur and a muzzle curled up in a snarl, showing off its slightly yellowed, long canine teeth. Looking back, it looked like an Irish wolfhound in size and shape, but with longer, ragged, jet black fur. Without thinking, I clenched my eyes shut and flipped over in bed, simply thinking that I was still asleep and that I could simply go away. But as I lay there, I heard the growl again right in front of me. I opened my eyes and quickly shut them, as the dog was now on the other side of the bed, still growling with its head low, like it wanted to get down to my eye level and stare into my soul. I flipped over again to face the window, and the dog was there again. No matter which way I faced, the dog would be there, snarling, staring, a low growl escaping its mouth. Loud enough to hear, but not loud enough for any of the adults to hear. I was alone and couldn't escape, and no help was coming. I don't know what drove me to do it, but after turning over for about the 10th time, I thought, screw it. And with my eyes glued shut, I sat up as quickly as I could and reached to turn on the lamp on beside the table. The moment the room filled with light, the growling stopped. I slowly opened one eye, and to my surprise, it had worked. The dog was gone, but I was still terrified. I didn't want to turn the light off, as it seemed to be keeping the giant dog at bay, and I didn't want to go to sleep, only to be woken by the dog again. I must have sat awake for a good half an hour, pondering where it had gone and whether it was real or not, before finally putting it down to just a bad dream, and that I had truly woken up when I turned the lamp on. Everything else that I thought had happened, I was actually asleep for. So I laid back down and flicked the lamp off, ready to drift off again now that I had finally calmed myself down and rationalized the situation. I had dreamt it all, projected my fears about the hallway into the shape of a dog, and let paranoia take over. Oh, how wrong I was. I had only closed my eyes for a few minutes before I heard the growling again, but this time much louder and at the foot of my bed. I kept my eyes closed and stayed as still as possible, praying silently that it would go away. Instead, I felt the door of the mattress sink down as it started to climb on the bed. The growling became louder and louder as it inched closer to me. I was terrified and frozen in fear as I felt one of its giant paws press against my leg through the covers, its claws digging into my thigh above my knee. It was right on top of me now, and I could feel its breath through its snarled teeth landing on my cheek. I don't know what drove me to do it, but I opened my eyes. Curiosity? Maybe. But I did it and came face to face with those haunting red eyes mere inches from my own, and I let out the most blood-curdling scream I had ever made in my short 7 years of life. Within seconds, I heard frantic footsteps running towards my room, and the door was flung open. My mother found me curled up on my bed, screaming between sobs and erratic as I looked around the room. The dog was gone. For good this time, it seemed. My mother comforted me as I tried my best to tell her everything, and she wiped away my tears with her sleeve. Of course, she didn't believe me and put it down to a bad dream and told me that dreams don't hurt you and that it's all in my head. Her usual go-to whenever I speak about anything that upset me. And to be honest, I kind of expected it. She put me back to bed when I eventually stopped crying, and somehow I fell asleep without incident. The dream doesn't hurt you nonsense was a clear lie come morning, because by the afternoon, a large bruise had started to form where the dog's paw dug into my thigh. It hurt so bad that I spent the rest of our holiday hobbing around North Wales with my nan's hiking stick, just to aid me. There's even a picture of me somewhere of me and my brother standing in front of a steam train a few days after this incident occurred, and I had that hiking stick in my hand. The rest of the holiday carried on without any other issues. I switched rooms to the one closest to my parents' room, and I never saw the black dog again. Overall, I enjoyed Wales and the quiet town of Morfaneffin. We would spend our evenings walking down to the beach and playing in the sand. Me and my brother even made friends with a few local kids, and we would play in the sand, digging a hole so big that we could all fit it, and quickly named it the bunker. And if you're wondering about the swift nest, the babies hatched just 2 days before our trip ended, and we were greeted every morning until we left by the sound of very hungry, featherless chicks begging their parents for food. I didn't want to leave them and sorrowfully waved goodbye to them when it was finally time for us to leave and head back to our little South London home. Though this was most definitely an up-close and personal encounter with a black dog. I didn't know that black dogs were a thing of legend across Wales and much of the UK until I told this story to a friend in college, and she told me that it was a black dog. I did more research into it, and sure enough, she was right. The pictures I had of the Welsh black dog, Gwilgi, matched what I saw that most almost perfectly, and it said that if you see the creature at night, there's certainly no fear behind. And death did follow. I found the dates and double-checked with my dad, and at the time, and sure enough, my great-great-granddad passed away due to a heart attack exactly 2 weeks after that night. I've always wanted to be sensitive or empathetic. I envy people who are. I collect very many odd and creepy things, almost inviting spirits to enter my home. I've never heard or seen anything, until recently. I started doing GVSS. GVSS is a process where you wear custom-made contact lenses at night, which reshape the surface of your eyes to give you 20/20 visions throughout the next day. Pretty cool, huh? No more glasses. Even cooler is that I can see some things I've never seen before. Maybe the timing is coincidental. Or maybe my glasses protect me from seeing things before. I'm not really sure. It's only been 5 days, and I've seen 3 entities. A single entity was seen on day 2. I was driving by a building on my way to work. It was still dark out as it was pretty early in the morning. I work at a large chemical manufacturing site that has been around for over 100 years. Plain as day, I saw a person leaning up against the abandoned building and smoking a cigarette. I drove by it, wondered why on earth they would be there smoking again in plain sight, against the rules. Looked in my rear view mirror, it was gone. The building was very large. There was no way for it to have simply walked away without me seeing it. The next morning, at the same chemical site but in a different area, I see a flicker of light near a lamppost in a parking lot. The light is only about waist high. I look in that direction and see a person putting on a jacket. I blink, it disappears. Last night, my family and I were in the living room watching a movie. I can see the stairwell from the couch I was sitting on. I see a childlike figure standing at the top of the stairs. It was too blurry to make out any features, but it was short in stature. I squinted to try to see it better, but then it turns and walks out of my line of sight. I don't chase after it. Actually, I'm pleased. I just graduated 6th grade at the time, and my family visited my relatives at our old house. It was getting dark at that time, since we just got back from a resort after celebrating my grandfather's birthday, so I was tired from all the swimming. Now, our old house has 3 exit doors. One is the main door that leads to our living room, which had a window that you could look through to see the fields that surround our house. Another that leads to said fields, and one that leads to the open garage that we shared with our neighbour. My older sister was talking to my favourite aunt through a phone call at the fields, and I wanted to talk to my aunt. I don't know why I didn't just go through the door that led to the fields to go to my sister. I decided to use the main door to go to her instead, since you can still go to the fields, but it will take longer. I walked through our living room towards the fields, and I looked through the window of our living room as I was starting to jog towards my sister. To my horror, I saw a lady wearing a very dark dress, just sitting very still and straight, with her hands on a lap on our couch that I just passed through a few seconds ago. I couldn't see the lady's face as it was covered by a veil or something. I don't know if she was covered in blood or her attire just had some red pattern or something. I was so scared of what I saw that my job immediately turned to run as I bolted towards my sister. As soon as my sister handed me the phone, I immediately told my aunt about what I saw. She didn't really believe me and just talked to me for a bit before ending the call. When my sister and I headed back to our house, I asked the rest of my family if anyone went to the living room after I went to my sister. I knew that it was impossible for them to have changed their outfit to a black dress with a red pattern, as everyone else was in the kitchen when I walked through the living room, but still asked them anyway if any of them went there after I did. Of course, everyone said that no one followed me to the living room. I told them about what I saw and they didn't really have much of a reaction. They just joked that maybe it was our neighbour who we'd been having a feud with for a while now. No one ever really experienced anything paranormal in that house, except if you count my sister's few sleep paralysis, about a little girl wearing a white dress that always wanted to play with her but would scare her all the time when she was younger. I later on had a dream about the girl when we moved to our new house. I have another story about her. I never had any encounters before or after that event. I still don't know if what I saw was real or not, since maybe I was just imagining it, since I was tired from all the swimming after all, but I sure did avoid the part of the couch that the lady was sitting on, and wouldn't stay in the living room alone for the rest of our visit. I can still clearly picture the lady sitting there at our couch, with her hands on her lap to this day, 10 years later. Let me first say that while I do believe in supernatural and paranormal phenomena, I'm still the sort to look for logical explanations to things. I do believe that whatever gives humans that spark of life remains after the body gives out. I also believe in the possibility of elemental spirits, spirits far older than humanity that are connected to the earth itself. We were at my in-laws' house, Charlotte, North Carolina area, US, this past Saturday, and while I sat at the dining room table chatting with mother-in-law, in my periphery on the left side, I saw and felt something whiz by me. It was at least 12 inches in length, maybe longer, with spindly arms and legs and a thin body. I only saw 4 appendages, 2 arms and 2 legs. There were no wings that I could see, and while I wouldn't really say it was anthropomorphic, the arms and legs were positioned in a way I'd imagined them in someone were to lift a person in a harness and fly them, hanging to the front and bent back and knees elbows. This thing had a head that was elongated and slightly rounded, oval shaped so it was longer than it was wide, but I didn't see any facial features. The best thing I can compare it to would be a giant stick bug with only 4 legs. I'm 100% certain it was not an insect. There's no way something that large would be in the house and no one saw it sooner. Plus, my mother-in-law has 2 cats that are prolific bug catchers. Has anyone ever encountered something like this? When I saw it, the word fairy immediately came to my mind, though I've never been one to believe in fairies. I'm just baffled as to what it might have been. I know I didn't imagine it. It was definitely there, and I heard a soft whoosh as it passed. This happened around 5 years ago when I was living in a very destructive lifestyle. I woke up having a view of myself in third person and the first person at the same time. I was laying down, paralysed, and levitating about 4 feet off of my bed, with my blankets still draped over me. I noticed a massive tarantula-like spider that was big enough to cover my entire chest, sitting on top of me. I was absolutely petrified. I remember the entity trying to give me a very strong, menacing sense of superiority, like it was stronger than me and that it was in control of the situation. After 10 seconds of this, it began speaking to me telepathically. In a very deep voice it said, "My name is," then saying an extremely bizarre sounding name from a language I'd never heard before, and I don't think I could spell it if I tried. It felt like whatever it was trying to possess me because, like I said, it gave a very strong feeling that it was superior to me and in charge of my life now. It was introducing itself. That was the last thing I remembered before waking up. I had another experience with the spider where I had just woken up and wasn't paralysed this time. The entity was on my roof at the other side of the room. This time, it didn't look like a solid being. It looked like it was made out of pure energy. When it noticed that I could see, it started scurrying towards me very aggressively, and before it got to me, it disappeared. That all happened within like 10 seconds. This one happened around the same time. I had woken up on my bed. I had the same point of views and I was paralysed again, but this time I wasn't levitating. I suddenly felt an invisible force grab onto my left leg. It very slowly started dragging me off my bed, and as I was being dragged, my body was violently flopping around like a rag doll. I had no control over this. I realised what was happening, and I tried to call for Jesus, but just as I was saying something held my lips. I literally couldn't say his name, and I got the feeling that I was unworthy to speak it because of the way I was living. I remember feeling an immense feeling of dread and hopelessness. He wouldn't help me. This one felt like it was a warning to change my ways before it was too late. It was the last thing I remember before waking up. I feel entities can attack us in our dream state and cause what's known as sleep paralysis. There are many stories where people called on Jesus and it ended the sleep paralysis episode. Am I saying all sleep paralysis episodes are demonic? I don't know, but mine certainly felt like it. I seen that spider thing another time while I wasn't in sleep paralysis. As I explained in my second section, so there's another reason that pushed me to believe It was really demonic. I also stupidly experimented with astral projection and had the same third and first person views astral projecting as I did during my episodes. I've been targeted by other entities while I was intentionally astral projecting, but that's another story. So, I went to bed in my very boring, very normal mid-2000s bedroom, playing a little Nintendo DS. Later than I should have on a school night, I'll admit. Then slept for maybe an hour or two, a little after 1 am, before waking up in desperate need to take a piss. I roll out of bed, not bothering to grab my glasses. My first mistake, as someone who's literally legally blind without them, and take the muscle memory 4 steps diagonally across my tiny bedroom floor. I'm a very tactile person due to my visual impairment, and I had my whole house, not only my room, memorized for safety to a T. I reached for my doorknob and I got nothing. Okay, maybe I'm not as awake as I thought. Never happens to me though. I wake up if one of my parents so much as breathes wrong across the damn house, but okay, I'm groggy. I reached to the left since I must have angled my walk wrong. Nothing. I try right. Nothing. Did I not walk far enough? I feel really awake now. I take another step, regretting the no glasses choice. I can barely make out shapes in the daytime, and darkness is a blanket over my eyes. I can't see my door, my bed, my own hands in front of me. I can't see. Where is my door? I take another step. 2, 3, 4. I flail my arms forward, silently pleading, please, my door. And I swear I can see the nightlight in the hallway that's there, so I won't eat carpet on my way to the toilet. Thanks, Mom. But no matter where I reach, how far I go, I can't get close enough. My memory gets hazy here. After maybe 2 straight minutes of aimless walking towards the hazy outline of light around a door, but my last thought from that between space-time is knowing and feeling that I was not at home. Then I'm in the hallway and I sleep on the couch for the rest of the night. Looking into my room felt like staring into an abyss. Nothing ever came of it, but I don't know if anything will ever get under my skin the way this experience did. I felt so unsafe, so helpless and so alien in that space, whatever it was, that I really wanted to share it with the masses. For context, during my lifetime, my parents have had 4 dogs. Let's call them E, Labrador Retriever, male, M, Finnish Lapphund, female, S, Labrador Retriever, male, and our current dog N, Labrador Retriever, male. We got our current dog N late last January, and our previous dog S passed away early last December. M passed away in 2015, and E has been dead for over 15 years now. I'm spending Christmas with my parents as always. Last year, early Christmas Eve morning, my father showed me an interesting finding. He had found some of M's fur on our foyer's carpet, just out of nowhere. She had black fur. All of our other dogs were yellow, so it was easy to recognise. We had kept some of her fur before she passed to compare it to as well. No other animals had visited us previously either. It was definitely her fur. It was a nice reminder since that was our first Christmas without S. M and S used to be friends before M passed, M being the strong-willed and feisty leader of these two. We speculated it might have fallen from our Christmas decoration box, and we just hadn't noticed it earlier. Strange, but comforting. We joked around that M had paid us a visit. We cleaned the Christmas decoration box just in case, and didn't find fur or anything else of place in it. Just now, I was decorating the tree with my mother. I noticed a white piece of something on the kitchen table before we brought the Christmas decoration box in, but didn't pay it any attention. I thought it was a dried up piece of gum that my mom eats or something. Later, however, I inspected it closer and noticed that it was too hard to dry up the gum. I flipped it around and came to a quick conclusion. It was a tooth, presumably a dog's tooth. At least it wasn't a human tooth. It looked slightly old and it was smaller than any of our Labrador's teeth would have been. I even asked my father if he had brought it in from the outside, but he hadn't seen it before. Our dog's end's mouth wasn't bleeding, missing any teeth, nor was the tooth bloody or even moist from slobber. Furthermore, it's too small to be his tooth. It does feel like a real tooth to me too, as I've inspected animal teeth before. Once is a happenstance, twice is a coincidence. Guess we'll have to wait until next Christmas to see if 3 is a pattern, and if we'll get a third reminder of M. Never before the passing of S did we find anything like this. Do you have any thoughts on this? Any similar experiences? Today I encountered a new entity. I hopped in bed and immediately felt something patting or caressing my head. I thought, oh, this is nice. Then she threw something at me. It was hard and hit me straight on the throat. At that moment I said out loud, I would love to get to know you. You're welcome here, but I need you to be nice to me. Everything following that was positive. She was shy, but did tell me some things about herself. She said her name is Tajil. Later, I did some research and it seems this is a Telugu word, language of southern India, meaning touching. Other translations include erosive and infectious. That last one concerned me a bit. She was responsive to me and demonstrated that she's capable of both telepathy and external speaking. She had a sense of humour. She sang to me beautifully. She's capable of physically touching me, my head, throwing that thing at me. To be able to speak externally and physically touch me is rare in my experience. Something unusual. Typically, when I hear disembodied voices or entities, whether it's external, internal, or telepathic, I find I instantly know everything about them. What they look like, their age, sex, where they're from, their history, etc. None of this is true to Jill. I have no idea what she looks like, how old she is. None of it. I do strongly suspect she is from the Telugu-speaking region of southern India. I believe she used to be a living human and this is her spirit. And she's here to help me. I should add, I live in the US and have zero connection to Hinduism. I've been going through a significantly difficult and confusing time in my life. I think she, her true, altruistic self, sensed this in the universe and came to find me. Soon into our interaction, which lasted approximately 3 or 4 hours, it became very clear to me that she was showing me mindfulness, how to stay in the absolute present moment, and to trust myself and my experiences. She only exists in the absolute present moment. Like I said, I've experienced many entities who have come and gone over a short period of time, but I sincerely hope Tajil is one who sticks around. I welcomed her with open arms and invited her to come anytime. Back in 2011, I was living in a rural town called Monroe, UT, finishing up my senior year in high school. Monroe is a town of around 2,000 residents and is home to one of the largest mountains in Utah, which my grandparents' house, where I was living at the time, resided at the base of. Our house was on top of a foothill and overlooked the quaint Monroe Valley. The house itself was about 3,500 square feet, with an entryway/foyer that was approximately 25 feet high and had a front room on either side of the entryway, and then the main living room and kitchen towards the back of the house, facing the mountain. The upstairs had 3 bedrooms, a small library, and then a balcony overlooking the foyer. The basement was a house itself, complete with 3 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen. Hopefully this paints y'all a picture of the setting. At this point in my life, my grandpa had been recently diagnosed with cancer. Because we didn't have a hospital in the area with an adequate treatment centre, my grandparents temporarily moved to southern Utah, where there was a hospital, and left me with the house to finish off my high school graduation and part of the summer. Because of this, my house was notorious for having the boys over, where we'd have parties and then play massive games of hide and seek in the dark. Sounds childish, but man, it was fun. I was also keen on having my friends over at all times, because being alone in a large home is creepy sometimes. And also because I had several encounters with spirits at one point in my life when I was living with my mom. But that story is for another time. Anyway, I didn't want to be alone in the house and preferred having people over. Well, right around the middle of June, I had two of my best friends over. Let's call them Jake and Sam. And each of us had a girl over and picked a room to hang out with them. If you're a religious person, then you probably believe that certain activities aren't necessarily inviting of the Holy Ghost. And let's just say my two friends and their girls at my place were doing what would be considered inviting of the Holy Spirit. I was with my best friend's sister and had recently been baptized, so I wasn't trying to get down with this girl at this point. Well, I hear a door shut and my third friend, let's call him Jaden, shows up after having gotten down with his gal at her place. Now I say this because if you're heavily religious, then you believe that the Holy Spirit was probably not in the house at all on this particular evening. But if you aren't religious, then disregard this paragraph. We end up sending the girls home, and it's just us boys enjoying our senior summer, playing COD Zombies, which I wasn't really into, but I enjoyed watching my friends play. Well, 2:30 AM starts to roll around, and my friend Jake asks if we want to play hide and seek in the dark, but with two caveats. We play the game while the COD Zombies theme song plays throughout the house, and no hiding in the basement because it's pitch black. Looking back to this night, the moon was fairly bright, so your eyes would adjust quickly to the nighttime if you were hiding and seeking upstairs, but not at all downstairs. Jake, Sam and I were into scary shit, but Jaden wasn't the biggest fan of it. Regardless, we all decided to play the game to this creepy music, and Jake was the first one as a seeker. Sam, Jaden and I immediately agreed to be bastards and hide in the basement, because we knew it'd take Jake forever to find us. So we hid in one of the bedrooms that was filled with a bunch of wooden chairs. About 10 minutes into his search, we hear him come downstairs and he begins talking to someone on the basement stairs. We then hear him yell something to those people, and then he enters the room we're hiding in. He starts moving loads of these chairs and finds us, and we start giggling like girls because we knew we broke the rules. We ask him who he was talking to, and he says, "Dude, I thought I was talking to Sam and Jaden, but all of you guys were here, so I have no clue who the silhouettes were on the stairs that were just looking at me and then ran away." Jake loved scary shit, so he shrugged it off like it was typical Jake trying to make a situation scary or creepy at night. Anyway, 15 or 20 minutes is a long time for one round of hide and seek, so we decided to just chill in the living room on the main floor while the COD zombie music is playing dimly in the background. After a few minutes of us hanging out, I say, we should watch a real exorcism video. I bet I can find one online. So I bust out my Mac and start searching for a video on obscure websites and finally find a vid. Jake was all for this, but Jaden and Sam were hesitant, understandably so. But I'm me, and I don't give a fuck, so I turn it on. Interestingly enough, this was shortly after 3 AM and was during the witching hour, which I didn't think about until after the fact. So Jake and I are watching this priest just do this random woman in holy water, while the priest is chanting Hebrew at her. The girl is strapped to a table and her body is convulsing like the chick from The Ring. I remember watching this video and getting cold chills immediately, but I was mesmerized because I had never seen anything so raw and real of this nature. I couldn't look away. Sam and Jaden tell me to turn it off, and even Jake looks hesitant. This is where things go south real quick. About 20 seconds into this video, I start hearing a knocking noise. Damn, I'm getting cold chills just typing this. The knocking noise was coming from the master bedroom directly above us in the living room, and it continually gets louder and louder and louder. And suddenly, it sounds like 4 or 5 people are running and slamming violently into the walls in the room above us. I look at Jake's face because he was sitting next to me, and I can barely make out a look of horror on his face because again, the lights were turned off everywhere in the house. Then I hear the chandelier in the foyer quake, and at this point I'm on high alert thinking, oh shit. Despite Jake fooling around this night, he was a relatively goody-goody, and I had never heard him say the F word, but he immediately screams, "Turn it the fuck off!" I slam my laptop shut, and all 4 of us run directly to the back doors, which are 10 feet away from us. As we're running, we hear a loud thud, 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 as if someone is punching the basement crawling from underneath us. It sounded like someone or something was trying to just tear through the floor beneath our feet. We make it outside during this time, and everything in the house goes silent. No more running from upstairs, no more chandeliers swinging, and no more punching ceiling noises from the basement. It's just us in the middle of the open night sky, torn between trying to look away from the house and towards the mountains, but simultaneously checking to see if something was going to run out of the house. The house was dead quiet, as if nothing ever happened, and we were all gazing into the house from the backyard. We were probably out in the backyard for 2 minutes in complete silence. I had noticed that Jaden was messaging someone frantically when we were outside, and he looked at me and said, "Michelle told me she was in the house with her drill team friends like 10 minutes ago, but told me she was only kidding, so what in the hell made these noises?" Backstory. Everyone in the small town knew my grandparents were away, so it was common for my friends to just pop in the house whenever, especially the drill team girls because they were some of our close friends. Right after he says this, I look at the other guys and all 3 of them are shedding many tears. All 3 of them were shaken to their core about what had happened. During that 45-second window of pure chaos, we each felt a sense of dread and hopelessness sweep over us. It was 1000% a bad spirit, or a few, that had just been in that house. Well, I have this house for another 6 weeks, and at some point, I'm going to have to go back in there and sleep. So we have to go back in and see what happened. Understandably, they were strongly against this idea, but I felt spiritually strong because of my recent baptism. So I led the way while we single-filedly walked in the house while each of their hands was grappling the person's shirt in front of them. We should go to the basement first, because it's the scariest and most obvious place where the banging noises were coming from, I say. We slowly creep down the basement steps, and I flip on the lights and see that the living room and kitchen were destroyed. The ceiling fan was laying on the ground, and at initial glance had looked like it was ripped straight off the ceiling. There were broken shards of glass and wood chips from the chaos scattered about the room. Now I'm thinking, how in the hell am I going to explain this to my family? Then we decided to search the rest of the house. The only other inexplicable thing was that the master bedroom's closet light was turned on, which we didn't ever turn on. That same night, I decided to go to bed in my room while the guys slept downstairs, because I was on this spiritual high and felt safe. But my friends each felt like they had uninvited the spirits from their sexual endeavours earlier that night. So they all slept in the living room downstairs. Jake woke up the next morning and had a nightmare about a little girl standing in the living room watching them sleep. But Jake loves scary things, so we never really knew whether he was being truthful about that dream or not. He's an extremely honest person, but he loves overhyping these types of things, so I never knew what to make of that dream. Fast forward to that weekend. My grandparents came over after my grandparents' radiation treatment because I told them what happened. They're somewhat religious, but not church fanatics, so they weren't sure what to believe at first. But they knew I wasn't a liar, and so they took my story as truth. I walked downstairs to the basement with my grandparents, and my grandpa bent to a knee to look at the ceiling fan's wiring and said, "This was cut perfectly across. Someone did this intentionally. This didn't fall out of the ceiling." Since that day, it only furthered my testimony of a God and of an evil. As of 2016, I've started to have weekly recurring variations of a dream where I'm in that house with a dark presence. I honestly might go to therapy after talking to my wife about it, as it seems to have caused lingering PTSD in some type of form for me. I'll be grateful for that night because it caused one hell of a story and an everlasting best friendship with those three guys. What are your thoughts? Do you think the silhouettes on the stairs from earlier that night were the same spirits that messed with us? Or do you think they were simply just shadows?